I stood at my mother's grave, clutching a single white rose, while my sister's mocking words cut deeper than the autumn wind. She sneered at the dress I wore, calling it cheap, unaware it was worth more than her rent, a design from my own secret label. My father dismissed me as a failure, and my brother offered loans I didn't need, each of them blind to the truth. For years, they believed I was nothing but a struggling daughter, clinging to a small boutique my mother left behind. What they never imagined is that I've built a global fashion empire worth billions, hidden in plain sight. Tonight, their cruelty meets its reckoning, and the world will finally see who I truly am. Subscribe now to Revenge Glow channel, because this story is about to turn everything upside down. The cemetery was quiet, though the San Diego sun pressed down with an unrelenting glare. I stood there, my fingers trembling around the stem of a single white rose. My dress, cut from the richest Italian fabric, fell smoothly against my frame. I had sewn it myself, every seam deliberate, every detail chosen with care. To anyone else, it might appear modest. To my sister, it looked cheap. Her voice carried across the mourners, dripping with contempt. "That dress looks so economical," she whispered loudly, ensuring others heard. "I suppose that is the best you can manage with that failing little shop." A few smirks from the crowd stung more than the words themselves, but I kept my eyes locked on the polished granite of my mother's headstone. The name Catherine Morgan shimmered in the reflection, reminding me of who I was and who I had been forced to pretend to be. A hand brushed against my shoulder. Ethan, my brother, had arrived with his usual scent of expensive cologne. "If you need a loan to keep your boutique alive, just ask," he said casually, as if his generosity was a gift I should be grateful for. "Not everyone is meant to handle money, Catherine." My jaw tightened, but I refused to respond. If I opened my mouth now, the truth would pour out, and they were not ready for it. Not yet. A memory broke through the moment like sunlight through clouds. I was 8 years old again, sitting beside my mother as she guided my tiny hands across a piece of fabric. "They will see your light someday, Katie," she whispered as the needle pulled thread through cloth. "Just wait." She believed in me when no one else did. That belief became the foundation of everything I built. Yet, even at her funeral, my father could not resist undermining me. He called my boutique a hobby, said I was sentimental, and with cold authority declared I had always been the family disappointment. His words landed like stones against my chest, heavy and familiar. I pressed my fingers to the hem of my dress, drawing strength from the fabric that represented more than cloth. It represented years of perseverance. That single garment cost $25,000, far more, than my sister's monthly rent. It was not just a dress. It was a statement of what I had achieved. But here, no one recognized it. They saw only weakness, failure, and sentimentality. Mother had seen the truth. Just last spring, she held my new collection in her hands, her eyes glowing with pride. "You were always meant for greatness," she told me. Her belief was why I kept going through a decade of secrecy. For 10 years, I lived two lives. To them, I was the struggling daughter clinging to my mother's little boutique. In reality, I was Kay Morgan, the name whispered in the fashion capitals of Paris, Milan, and Tokyo. The name that celebrities sought, the brand that moved billions of dollars annually. I hid this life from them, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew how they operated. They would manipulate, they would take credit, and eventually they would demand everything I built. My mother knew. She kept my secret because she understood it was the only way to protect me from their greed. Now she was gone, lowered into the ground while they laughed about selling the very shop she entrusted to me. My father announced he had contacted a realtor to put the property on the market. "The proceeds will benefit the whole family," he said as though it were already decided. I spoke quietly, but my words carried weight. Mother left the boutique to me. It is not for sale. Their laughter rang out too loudly for a place of mourning. Brianna touched my shoulder with a smile of false sympathy, calling it a little store, like a child's lemonade stand. My father loomed over me, his voice commanding me to come to his house tomorrow for a discussion. He told me not to be difficult. The implication was clear. They planned to take from me the last piece of my mother's legacy. Before I could answer, a calm, firm voice broke the tension. "Miss Morgan," Eleanor said, stepping forward with car keys in hand. She looked every bit the assistant they believed her to be. "Your conference call is in 30 minutes, Brianna scoffed, mocking me again. "Still keeping Mother's shop girl around? How sweet." They did not know Eleanor was my executive vice president, overseeing operations across 12 countries, commanding a salary that would make them choke. She had been with me through every step of building the empire. She was more than an assistant. She was the guardian of my secret. I should have followed her to the car, should have gone to the meeting with my Tokyo team about the new flagship store. But something shifted within me. For years, I had carried the weight of pretending. My mother's death loosened the final thread of that disguise. "Reschedule the call," I told Eleanor, my voice steady. "I need you here, tonight." She raised a brow, but obeyed without question. My family watched with puzzled expressions, still blind to the reality surrounding them. They saw me as they always had, weak Catherine clinging to scraps of hope. When they turned away to discuss dinner plans, I remained at the grave. My rose trembled in my hand. Eleanor stood silently beside me, her presence grounding me. 10 years of secrets pressed against the moment, urging me to reveal what I had hidden. Tomorrow, I whispered to her, they would learn who I truly was. Tomorrow, the family that had dismissed me as nothing would see the empire I built while they mocked me. I laid the rose on my mother's grave, promising her silently that her faith in me had not been wasted. Later, I returned to my penthouse, where grief and strategy intertwined. The San Diego harbor glittered outside my window, waves catching the light of the setting sun. Inside, Eleanor placed folders on my desk with precise order. They contained everything I needed to face my family, their debts, their failures, their schemes. She detailed Ethan's insider trading investigation, Brianna's spiraling credit, and father's collapsing portfolio. Piece by piece, the illusion of their superiority fell apart. I listened, not with surprise, but with the calm of someone who had always known the truth would surface. As I traced the embossed KM logo on the folders, I realized what tomorrow would bring. This was no longer about hiding. It was about reclaiming power, protecting my mother's legacy, and establishing the boundaries I had been too afraid to draw. The meek daughter they thought they could control was gone. In her place stood the architect of a billion-dollar empire, ready to reveal herself. I lifted my gaze from the documents to the city lights beyond my window. My voice was quiet, but it carried conviction. Tomorrow, they will know. Tomorrow, everything changes. The evening air carried a cool breeze when I returned to my penthouse, a space of glass and steel that overlooked the shimmering San Diego harbor. From 40 stories above, grief felt like something I could almost organize, a storm I could contain within walls of logic and preparation. Eleanor stood near my desk, her posture composed as always, setting a neat stack of folders in front of me. "Everything is arranged as you requested," she said, her voice professional yet softened by the weight of the day. The golden light of sunset caught her silver-streaked hair, making her appear both commanding and protective. I touched the folders with trembling fingers, tracing the embossed KM logo as if it could remind me of who I was beneath the pain. "Show me," I whispered. The first folder revealed Ethan's downfall. Charts, statements, and legal notices outlined the severity of his situation. He was under federal investigation for insider trading, his leveraged investments spiraling into disaster. Without a defense team, he faced prison. Eleanor's words were calm but the truth was merciless. $850,000 would be needed just to give him a chance at leniency. I remembered his smug voice at the cemetery offering me a loan as if I were the one drowning. He had no idea I could buy and sell his future with a single phone call. The second folder was crimson, almost mocking in its elegance. Inside, photographs and reports detailed Brianna's fragile empire of appearances. Designer gowns borrowed for galas, champagne glasses lifted for photographers, luxury apartments rented but unpaid. $9,500 every month, stacked against credit cards at their limits and loans she could never repay. One missed payment, and the glittering tower she built around herself would collapse. She had laughed at my dress that morning, never realizing she was the one wearing a costume. Beneath the gloss, she was only one step away from eviction. The third folder was heavier, thick, with documents that reeked of betrayal. My father's empire, Morgan Property Development, had rotted from the inside out. Failed investments, reckless refinancing, foreclosure notices. His wealth, the shield he wielded to command us, had crumbled into ash. Eleanor turned each page carefully, as if handling evidence at a trial. "He has been planning to sell the boutique property for years," she said, her eyes steady on mine. The words struck harder than I expected. He had waited for Mother to die before accelerating the plans. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep looking. 3 separate developers had prepared proposals. He had never seen the boutique as a sanctuary. To him, it was nothing more than land to exploit. "Is there more?" I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. Eleanor slid her tablet across the desk. Intercepted emails exchanged between my siblings just days before the funeral revealed their coordinated strategy. Ethan would apply pressure, Brianna would play the concerned sister, and father would dominate the negotiations. They had rehearsed how to strip away what they thought was my last possession. Reading their words was like holding a knife that had already cut me. The betrayal was not surprising, but seeing it laid bare still stung. I walked to the window, looking out across the city as the sky darkened to deep indigo. Somewhere below, my family likely toasted themselves with borrowed champagne, confident that they would soon hold the keys to the boutique. They could not imagine the reality. "Show me Mother's correspondence," I said. Eleanor opened a leather-bound portfolio, carefully preserved. Inside were letters written in her hand, each stroke of ink a thread that tied me back to her. She had protected my secret fiercely, never wavering, even as her health declined. A memory surfaced, her fragile hand clutching mine in the hospital, her voice a whisper. "They never deserved to know Katie. Never." Tears threatened, but I pressed them back. "Now it becomes my shield," I murmured. The words felt like a vow. Eleanor nodded, her expression unreadable but steady. "Revealing your identity as Kay Morgan will change everything permanently." I closed my eyes for a moment, drawing strength from the silence. When I opened them, resolve had replaced hesitation. "Then, let us be clear about exactly what they are facing." I returned to the desk and studied the financial dossiers again, not as a daughter, but as the head of a global fashion empire. Richard needed $1.3 million to keep bankruptcy at bay. Ethan's trial loomed in 3 months. Brianna had less than a month before eviction. Their desperation made them dangerous, but also predictable. They would claw at me, but they had nothing left to stand on. Eleanor listed my resources with military precision, legal teams on standby, media outlets ready to publish, international assets protected by trusts. I listened, my mind already shaping the battlefield ahead. The boutique, small and quiet on the outside, would become the stage for revelation. I would not go to my father's house, where he thought he could command me like a child. They would come to me, and they would walk into the truth I had built. My mother's boutique would be the gateway to the empire they never saw. That night, as the harbour lights flickered, I called Samuel Whitaker, my mother's attorney. His calm voice answered after 2 rings. I requested every document related to her estate, every hidden clause, every legal thread that might bind or free me. When the call ended, I stood at the window once more, my reflection merging with the city lights. For 10 years, I had hidden behind the image of a struggling daughter. Tomorrow, that mask would fall. The family who dismissed me, who mocked me, who believed me weak, would see what I had truly become. And when they realised the truth, it would not be revenge they faced. It would be boundaries drawn with the unshakable ink of power. The morning sun spilled across the boutique's display windows, casting golden light onto scarves carefully arranged in the front. To passers-by, it was a simple shop, modest and quaint, the sort of place that might survive on local customers and sentimental value. To my family, it was all I had left. To me, it was only the facade of something far greater. I arrived 3 hours before they were due to come, my heels clicking softly against the wooden floorboards that Mother and I had chosen decades ago. This was where I had played as a child, where I learned to sew, where I dreamed in silence while my father told me I would never amount to anything. Today, it would become the stage for their awakening. Samuel was already waiting inside, his leather portfolio tucked neatly under his arm. His glasses glinted in the sunlight as he handed me a sealed envelope. "Your mother's final arrangements," he said quietly. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. The words blurred for a moment as my eyes filled with tears. She had left me everything, not just the boutique, but the entire Morgan estate. Full authority, complete control. A lifetime of dismissal and ridicule collapsed into a single truth. She had always believed in me, even when no one else did. Samuel's voice cut gently into my thoughts. "Your father believes he will be in charge. He assumes everything will be divided equally." I shook my head, scanning the documents again. "They do not know." His answer was firm. "No." The betrayal was swift, almost cruel. Samuel revealed that, even as we buried Mother, my family had met with developers to discuss demolishing the boutique. Their signatures were prepared, their plans laid weeks in advance. They had been waiting, circling like vultures. My stomach twisted, but I straightened my shoulders. "We changed the meeting location," I said. "They will not drag me into his house. They will come here." Samuel agreed, a flicker of pride passing over his features. The battleground was set. The transformation of the boutique began immediately. While the storefront remained the same, designed to look modest, the back revealed its true identity. Behind an employees-only sign, a glass door opened into 35,000 square feet of headquarters. Designers moved with quiet focus, preparing mannequins dressed in the next season's collection. Awards gleamed on the walls. Eleanor coordinated every detail, ensuring the illusion of a small shop would shatter the moment my family stepped through the door. She approached me with her tablet, her eyes steady. "They are here," she said, "earlier than expected." I drew a slow breath. Let them wait in the front for 5 minutes. The monitor displayed their impatience. Brianna ran her hand across a dress, her lips curling with disdain. Ethan checked his watch, the habit of a man who believed his time more valuable than anyone else's. Father stood tall in the centre, surveying the shop, as though preparing to claim it. None of them suspected that the boutique was merely a shell. Eleanor's voice was quiet but resolute. "Time to educate them." I nodded, my hand on the glass door. For 10 years, I had endured their contempt in silence. That silence ended now. I stepped into the boutique, my voice calm. "Thank you for coming." Confusion flickered across their faces as I guided them past the sign that had once been a boundary. The glass doors opened and their steps faltered. Mannequins in gowns lined the hallway, Designers moved with precision, and the KM logo adorned the walls. "What is this?" Father demanded, but the answer came before I spoke. A young designer approached with a tablet. "Miss Morgan, the Paris team needs your approval on fabric selections." I replied smoothly, "Cerulean for the full collection." Ethan's eyes widened as he realized this was not a performance. This was power. Inside the conference room, I gestured for them to sit. The panoramic windows revealed San Diego's skyline, sunlight streaming across polished wood. "This is KM Atelier's West Coast headquarters," I said evenly, "one of 12 worldwide." Brianna's hand flew to her mouth, her voice trembling. "You are Kay Morgan?" I folded my hands. "I am." Ethan fumbled with the documents at his seat, his eyes widening as he read the revenue figures. "This says 2.4 billion in annual revenue." "Correct," I answered. 52 stores, 7,000 employees. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Father's fist slamming against the table. "Absurd," he barked. "You have been running a small boutique. You cannot expect us to believe this." My gaze did not waver. "I do not expect you to believe. I expect you to understand." I pressed a button, and the screen filled with their financial ruin, foreclosure notices, debt statements, SEC investigation documents, their faces drained of colour. Brianna hissed, "You have been lying to us for years." I leaned forward, my voice calm but edged with steel. "No, I have been protecting myself. From you." The silence deepened until even the sound of the city seemed to fade. For the first time, they had nothing to say. Eleanor entered with another portfolio, placing it in front of me. "The Volante acquisition papers you requested, Ms. Morgan." I slid them toward my family. $2 billion, finalized yesterday. The news you missed because you were too busy planning to steal from me. Father tried to rally, his pride refusing to break. "As your father, I should have guided you. I should have been informed." I cut him off. "You lost that right the moment you dismissed everything I built as a hobby. You lost it when you called me a disappointment at Mother's funeral." Samuel entered then, carrying documents that sealed the truth. "Your mother left Catherine as executor of the entire estate," he announced. "The decision is final." Father's face turned crimson, his authority slipping through his hands like sand. Brianna's eyes filled with tears. Ethan's smirk evaporated, and silence settled like judgment. For years, they had believed me weak. In a single morning, that illusion died. I looked at each of them, steady and unafraid. "I am willing to help you," I said, "but only on my terms." The room seemed to hold its breath. They understood now. The daughter they mocked had become the woman who held their futures in her hands. And for the first time in my life, the balance of power belonged to me. 3 days had passed since I revealed myself as Kay Morgan. The shock that silenced my family in the conference room had faded, replaced by something colder. This was no longer about grief or revelation. It was business, and business required strategy. I sat at the head of a long mahogany table, surrounded by my legal team and advisors, the San Diego skyline gleaming beyond the glass walls. Eleanor sat at my right, her tablet glowing softly as she guided us through the agenda. My attorneys laid folders in front of me, each labelled with a family member's name. It was time to decide their futures. The first folder contained the agreement for Richard, my father. His real estate empire had collapsed, leaving him with nothing but debt and empty properties. The document outlined terms for him to remain in a modest home owned by my company, not the sprawling coastal estate he once flaunted. The second folder held Ethan's contract, offering top legal representation for his trial, but only if he cooperated fully and admitted his role in the crimes. The third folder was for Brianna, a job offer at one of my subsidiaries, a starting position in sales at $18 an hour. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no glamorous title. If they wanted help, it would come with accountability. They will see this as an insult, my attorney warned. I closed the folders with deliberate calm. Then they are free to refuse and face the consequences alone. Eleanor's gaze flickered across the table, her voice steady. Every dollar must come with conditions, or they will drain you, as they always have. I nodded. She was right. For years, I had carried their dismissal quietly. Now, silence had ended. This was not vengeance. It was boundaries carved into contracts. As the meeting continued, my PR team raised concerns. What if the story leaked to the press? What if the world saw these contracts as cruelty rather than structure? I considered the question carefully. We present them as responsibility, I said. The narrative is not about punishing them. It is about protecting what I built and ensuring accountability. The advisors exchanged glances, then nodded. The strategy was sound. Every angle had to be considered, from inheritance, taxes, to media fallout. This was not only about family, it was about a global brand, one that could not be tarnished by scandal. Later that afternoon, Eleanor entered my office with fresh intelligence. She set a cup of coffee beside me before speaking. Your father has contacted 3 law firms about contesting the will. Ethan has been reaching out to journalists, pitching a story about the Morgan dynasty. Brianna has been posting cryptic hints on social media. Her words carried no judgment, only precision. I looked out at the harbour, calm and vast, in contrast to the chaos beneath. Have the PR team prepare contingency statements, I said. The brand must remain untouchable. Eleanor tapped her tablet, already moving forward. She had always known how to translate my decisions into action. The storm broke sooner than expected. A blog post appeared online, suggesting that Kay Morgan was nothing more than my father's creation, with me as the face of his supposed genius. The article cited an anonymous source. Within minutes, it spread across social media, amplified by Brianna's friends. Rage burned through me, sharp and steady. They were not satisfied with taking my inheritance. Now they wanted my name, my reputation, my empire. Eleanor stood beside me, her voice even. They are more strategic than we thought. I nodded, the anger hardening into resolve. Then we moved to phase 2. The next day, my legal team finalised contracts for each family member. They would be presented as non-negotiable. My father would live in a smaller home, publicly acknowledging that I alone built KM Atelier. Ethan would receive legal defence, but only if he stopped trying to rewrite the narrative. Brianna would work her way up from the bottom. The terms were fair, even generous, but they carried one clear message. Their power over me was gone. This was no reconciliation. This was restructuring. Then Eleanor's phone buzzed with urgent news. Richard has scheduled a press conference, she said, her voice clipped. Tomorrow morning he will announce that the family stands behind Kay Morgan, claiming himself as the force behind the empire. My chest tightened, but I did not falter. Then we do not wait. The meeting moves to tonight. Eleanor's eyes widened briefly before she nodded. Understood. That evening, the conference room became a battlefield. My father entered with Ethan and Brianna at his side, and to my shock, Thomas Vellante, the founder of the luxury brand I had just acquired. His presence was a deliberate strike, meant to destabilize me. Father introduced him with smug confidence, as if unveiling a weapon. Brianna slid a portfolio across the table, claiming discrepancies in the acquisition. Ethan warned of shareholder concerns about my double identity. The trap was set, but I had prepared for more than they knew. Eleanor slipped out silently, returning minutes later with Samuel Whitaker and my legal team. Documents spread across the table, undeniable evidence. Signed acknowledgements from Thomas confirming my identity as Kay Morgan. Recorded conversations of my father offering bribes to secure support. Every move they thought was hidden was already documented. My family's triumph faltered as the weight of proof crashed down upon them. Thomas paled as he realised his signature was in my hands, binding him to the truth. My father sputtered in protest, but his words fell flat in the silence that followed. I leaned forward, my voice calm but final. These are your options. You sign the contracts, or you walk away with nothing. The legal team distributed folders, each tailored to their vulnerabilities. Ethan's criminal defence in exchange for cooperation. Brianna's employment with no shortcuts. Richard's housing contingent upon public acknowledgement of my achievements. They stared at the documents, their confidence unravelling. For the first time, they understood that this was no longer their game. This was mine. As I stood, gathering my notes, I looked at each of them. You have 1 hour to decide. Accept my terms or be cut off completely. My voice carried no anger, only certainty. The daughter they once mocked had become the woman who dictated their futures. I turned toward the door, my heels echoing against the polished floor. Behind me, Eleanor's voice sealed the moment. Ms. Morgan will not negotiate further. Those terms are final. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of inevitability. For the first time, my family had no control, no leverage, and no escape. Only the truth remained. The conference room was silent, except for the sound of papers being turned. Contracts lay in neat stacks before each of my family members, their names etched across the top. Behind me, board members and trusted executives stood as witnesses, their presence transforming this from a family squabble into a formal reckoning. The air was heavy, charged with years of unspoken contempt, resentment, and betrayal. I placed my hands flat on the table, steady, deliberate. Have you reached a decision? I asked. Richard, my father, turned from the window, where he had been staring at the skyline. His shoulders carried the same rigid pride that had defined him for decades. This is ridiculous, he declared, his voice attempting to command the room as it once commanded me. These terms are insulting. I built this family. I gave you everything. My laugh escaped before I could stop it, sharp and cutting. Everything? You gave me doubt. You gave me criticism. Mother gave me belief. His face hardened, his eyes narrowing in fury. Your mother valued loyalty above all, he said, his voice dropping into the dangerous tone I had known as a child. She would want you to forgive family. The words were meant to wound, to summon the guilt he had always used as a weapon. For a moment, I felt that old reflex, the urge to shrink, to yield. Then I remembered the letters. I opened the leather portfolio Eleanor had prepared and slid a bundle of faded pages across the table. My mother's handwriting sprawled across them, graceful and firm. She documented everything, I said, my voice steady. Every dismissal, every scheme, every time you tried to strip me of my independence. Brianna lunged to grab the papers, but Eleanor intercepted, laying down another folder. I kept records as well, she said. Phone calls, letters, attempts to break her lease, every effort to undermine her. My father's face flushed crimson, his hands clenching against the table. This is a business meeting, he snapped, and not a therapy session. Your grievances are irrelevant. But before I could reply, Thomas Volanti, seated quietly until now, leaned forward. His accent carried through the room like silk laced with steel. On the contrary, he said, I was offered a bribe yesterday by Richard Morgan himself. He suggested I delay our acquisition in exchange for a percentage of his board compensation. The board members shifted uncomfortably, and even Ethan froze, realizing the trap had collapsed on their side. The evidence came piece by piece. Ethan's documents showed his attempts to push blame onto others during his financial scandal. Brianna's social media campaign revealed her plan to present herself as the creative force behind my label. My father's agreements with developers, dated weeks before Mother's death, proved his intent to demolish the boutique before her body was even cold. Samuel, my attorney, spoke firmly. Speaking for all parties present, Miss Morgan built this empire alone. The evidence is irrefutable. I looked directly at my father, my voice low. This is no longer about family. This is business. And the business belongs to me. I slid the contracts forward again. Sign them now or leave with nothing. The tension thickened, a suffocating weight pressing against every corner of the room. Ethan broke first. He flipped through the pages of his agreement, jaw tight, eyes dark. "This legal team will cost a fortune," he muttered. I leaned back in my chair. "Yes, my fortune. Your cooperation is the price of survival." Slowly, reluctantly, he reached for the pen and signed. Richard stared at his son in disbelief, his power unravelling in real time. For decades, his authority had been absolute. Now, in front of witnesses, it crumbled like dust. Brianna's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she looked at me. "You really do not need us, do you?" she whispered. I shook my head. "I never did, but I'm offering you a chance anyway." She looked down at the contract, outlining her entry-level position, a life far from the glamour she craved. With trembling hands, she signed. All eyes turned to Richard. He stood rigid, pride battling with desperation. "This is how you honour your mother," he spat us, "Judge, by humiliating your father?" His voice broke on the last word, cracking the illusion of strength he clung to. I met his gaze without flinching. "Mother left me the choice. Live in the home I offer you or live on your own. Those terms remain unchanged." His hand shook as he finally reached for the pen. The signature he scrawled was uneven, shaky, a stark contrast to the bold man who once intimidated boardrooms and children alike. One by one, the contracts were signed. 3 names on paper, 3 admissions that the truth had always been mine. The weight of 10 years lifted from my chest, replaced by a steadiness I had never known. This was not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but resolution. They had mocked me at a funeral, dismissed me for years, tried to claim what was not theirs. Now, bound by ink, they admitted what they had denied. I built this empire. Samuel collected the contracts, his voice quiet but final. "Copies will be sent to your addresses. The terms are clear." My father's shoulders slumped, his authority broken, his voice hollow. "That is all?" "That is all," I replied. Ethan would meet his lawyers Monday. Brianna would begin training next week. Richard would move into the rental tomorrow. They rose to leave, diminished in ways that went beyond money or property. Their arrogance had dissolved, their masks fallen. For the first time, I saw them as people stripped bare, not villains, not giants, simply fragile souls forced to live with the consequences of their own choices. Eleanor stood at my side, her presence steady as ever. "Your mother would be proud," she said softly. I nodded, watching them walk away. "This is not revenge," I whispered. "It is boundaries." Revenge seeks to harm, but boundaries protect. For years I had hidden, believing secrecy was safety. Now I understood that true safety came from standing firm in my truth. The conference room emptied until only Eleanor and I remained. The signed contracts lay before me. Not just legal documents, but declarations of independence. I was Catherine Morgan, founder of KM Atelier, daughter of Martha Morgan. I had built an empire in silence, and now the silence was broken. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the San Diego sky in streaks of crimson and gold. It was the hour my mother loved most, the transition between worlds. Standing there, I realized I had crossed my own threshold. No longer the daughter desperate for approval, no longer the woman hiding her success, but someone who could carry her legacy forward without fear. For the first time since her death, I felt her presence, not as grief, but as strength. 6 weeks had passed since my mother's funeral, and 3 since the day I revealed the truth that had been hidden for a decade. The world now knew me not as the struggling daughter of Martha Morgan, but as Kay Morgan, the architect of a global fashion empire. Headlines blazed across newspapers and websites, calling me fashion's best-kept secret. The New York Times ran a feature that traced my journey from an unknown designer to the leader of a multi-billion-dollar company. For the first time, I was seen for who I truly was. Yet, even in recognition, I understood this story was never about me alone. It was about legacy, transformation, and the delicate balance between boundaries and forgiveness. Eleanor sat across from me in my office, sliding a report across my glass desk. "Web traffic is up 45% since the article," she said. "Followers doubled in less than a month. Sales continue to rise." Her voice carried satisfaction, though she never lost her composure. I nodded, still adjusting to the shift. For years, I had lived behind a mask of smallness. Now the mask was gone and the world's eyes were fixed upon me. The harbour glimmered through the windows, the water reflecting the sunset's orange glow. It was the same city where my family had mocked me, and now the same city that celebrated me. "Any word from Richard?" I asked quietly. Eleanor's expression softened. "Your father has settled into the Coronado condo. He donated most of his furniture to the Veterans Housing Project. He also began volunteering at a retirement community, teaching residents how to adapt clothing for mobility." The image startled me. My father, who once towered over boardrooms with arrogance, now bent over a sewing machine, guiding wrinkled hands through fabric. It was not redemption, not entirely, but it was something. Perhaps humiliation had cracked the shell of pride he wore his entire life, and something human was beginning to grow in the fractures. "And Ethan?" I asked. Eleanor adjusted her glasses. "His attorney confirmed a transfer of $1.8 million toward the Designer Restitution Fund. He is working with his legal team, compiling detailed records of every person he harmed with his financial schemes." It was a strange form of penance, but it was real. For once, my brother was not trying to escape accountability. He was living it. "And Brianna?" I asked last, bracing myself. A small smile touched Eleanor's lips. She completed her first week of sales training. There were arguments, yes, but she surprised everyone by staying late to reorganize the accessory floor. Her supervisor believes she has a natural gift for customer connection. I leaned back, absorbing the thought. Brianna, who once thrived on appearances, now learning humility one customer at a time. It was not transformation overnight, but it was a step. The months passed quickly. Public attention turned from the scandal of Revelation to the future of KM Atelier. We launched the Morgan Fund for Emerging Designers, a foundation dedicated to helping young creators avoid the exploitation and financial traps I had once endured. I signed the founding documents with a steady hand, redirecting the energy of gossip into opportunity for others. It felt like balance, like honouring my mother's memory in a way even she might not have imagined. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the International Design Awards. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, gowns, and anticipation. I wore my mother's vintage dress, redesigned with subtle changes to honour her style while making it my own. My voice carried through the hall as I presented the Breakthrough Designer Award, no longer trembling, no longer small. The crowd applauded, the cameras flashed, but my gaze found the faces that once dismissed me. Richard sat near the stage, his frame leaner, his pride tempered. He nodded slightly when our eyes met. Ethan, seated beside him, scribbled notes for a lecture he would give the next day on ethical contracts for young designers. And Brianna, radiant in a dress from our affordable line, was speaking animatedly with buyers, her energy transformed from vanity into passion. The family who once sought to strip me bare now stood beside me, reshaped by the very boundaries they once despised. After the ceremony, Eleanor leaned close and whispered, "The Volante integration exceeds projections, and the education initiative launches next month." I squeezed her hand, gratitude filling me. She had been my constant, my anchor, the one who stood beside me when even blood turned against me. The applause still echoed in my ears, but it was her steady presence that reminded me of the true foundation beneath everything I had built. Later, in my penthouse, my family gathered around the dining table. The same faces as before, but not the same people. We discussed quarterly numbers, but more importantly, we discussed the foundation's impact. Designers who had been on the verge of bankruptcy were now creating again, their dreams preserved because of what we had built. Brianna suggested a scholarship in our mother's name for design students struggling financially. Ethan spoke of legal protections for young talent. Richard talked about placing Mother's first sewing machine in the company museum. For the first time, we were not clawing at each other. We were building something together. I stood at the window after dinner, gazing at the San Diego skyline. It was the same view I had looked upon with grief and rage, the same harbour that glittered when I plotted boundaries. Now it felt different. My family was not perfect. They carried their flaws like scars, but they were learning, and I was no longer hiding. Success, I realised, was not about wealth or power alone. It was about integrity, about the courage to draw lines where none had existed before, and about the willingness to help others rise once you had risen. I touched the locket around my neck, containing a single thread from my mother's first sewing project. "The greatest legacy," I said softly, "is not what we build for ourselves, but what we help others create." Eleanor, standing beside me, raised her glass. "And your mother would be proud to see you living it." For the first time since that day at the cemetery, I felt peace. Not because I had won, but because I had chosen to protect, to guide, and to grow. The empire was mine, the boundaries were firm, and the legacy, finally, belonged to all of us. The journey from the cemetery to the boardroom, from silence to truth, has been more than a story about fashion or business. It is the story of a daughter dismissed, a woman underestimated, and a legacy nearly stolen. Standing at my mother's grave, I held a single white rose while my family laughed at me. They believed I was small, weak, sentimental. What they did not know was that every moment of dismissal was fueling the strength I would one day reveal. I built an empire in the shadows, not because I wanted to hide, but because I knew protection sometimes requires silence. My mother protected my secret because she saw what I was building, and she believed the world was not ready yet. And when she left, when her voice was no longer there to defend me, I had to become my own shield. That moment was not revenge. It was the birth of boundaries. My family thought they were taking everything from me when they plotted to sell the boutique. What they did not realise was that the boutique was never the prize. It was only the doorway to something far greater. When the glass doors opened and they saw the empire behind it, their silence said more than any insult ever could. For the first time, they faced me not as a disappointment, but as the woman who built something they could never control. But this story is not about humiliation. It is about transformation. My father, stripped of power, now teaching others the skill he once mocked. My brother, forced to face the consequences of his corruption, now using his knowledge to protect the next generation. My sister, who once measured worth in champagne glasses and rented gowns, now learning humility through real work. The change did not come from anger. It came from limits, from boundaries drawn with clarity and love for my mother's legacy. The greatest inheritance is not wealth, nor property, nor recognition. It is the courage to protect your truth, the strength to stand alone if you must, and the wisdom to build something greater than yourself. My mother understood that. She left me not only her boutique, but her faith, her belief that light shines brightest when the world tries hardest to dim it. And now I share this story with you, because maybe you too have been dismissed. Maybe you have been underestimated, told you were not enough. But let this be proof. The world does not decide your value. You do. And when the time comes, your truth will speak louder than every voice that ever doubted you. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own strength, then join me on this journey. Subscribe now to Revenge Glow channel, where stories of resilience, justice, and hidden triumphs come to life. Because sometimes the most powerful glow is born in the darkest places.